Oh boy. Over the last couple of years since The Witcher 3's release, I've tried so hard to play it, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It was only until I found myself unemployed for the first time in 6 years that I was really able to sit down and get stuck in. The thing that kept me at arm's length from playing the game that so many consider one of the best of all time was its ocean of content. I have what people could call ADHD brain. I don't actually have ADHD, but I struggle to invest a lot of time into a video game. My attention wanes, I get bored, and for whatever reason, the longer I play something, the less likely I am to complete it. The Witcher 3 was one of these games, and another great example is Metal Gear Solid 5. I've got nearly 40 hours in that game, and I got maybe halfway through it before putting it down never to play it again. If a game has shit side content that bores the pants off me, I'll just ignore it and focus on the main game. If the game has good side stuff, I'll dip my toes into that sea of content, but risk getting drawn away by another game that I fancy playing instead. I get exhausted in a sense and want to do something else. Too many games, so little time. Them short and sweet Call of Duty campaigns are right up my alley. Yeah, I said it. I like Call of Duty campaigns. Fight me! The Witcher 3 is a very intimidating game. There's hundreds of hours of content nestled away inside. Good night, mate! There's hundreds of hours of content nestled away inside all that fantasy goodness, and to be frank, I didn't have the time for all that until now. Now that I've taken the time to play it, I think I should point out why it's worth looking at it to other people who are like me. Or were like me anyways. People who want to give it a go, but don't want to invest the time. I think it's safe to say that everyone agrees it's a good game, but there's no point giving it a go if you're not willing to put the time in. Not exactly fair on the game, is it? Take a good wine for example. To enjoy a good wine you need to slow things down, admire the colour, the smell, really take in the taste and texture. Or you can just pop off the cork and down the bottle there and then. One's appreciating it for what it is, and the other's just getting it over and done with. Okay, so we're going to pretend for a little while that everyone watching this video has no idea what The Witcher 3 is. If you don't, good. If you do, you might learn a little more of what the game is. If you've played the game, then I'm not sure why you're watching the video, but welcome, stay a while, warm yourself by the fire. In The Witcher 3, you play as Geralt of Rivia, a career monster hunter that's been conditioned from childhood through magic and physical training to become a killing machine, a witcher. It's hard to not find him a likeable character after the amount of time you spend as him. I did at first feel like he was a little boring, he doesn't really show much in the way of emotions, although that's apparently to do with some ritual that turns people into witches. As you make your way through the story, you do see a bit more of Geralt's personality shine through, especially with his adoptive daughter, Ciri, who's the main focus of the story. Basically, these evil people called the Wild Hunt are after Ciri because she has special genes that give her special powers and the baddies want them or something. A good amount of the game is spent following Ciri's path across the game's pretty huge open world. There are a few occasions where you play Ciri in flashbacks as characters tell Geralt what happened when the person met her. These are pretty linear short sections, but are a shitload of fun. One of Ciri's defining traits is her ability to teleport through, and I quote from the game, space and time. This makes the game's combat pace insane. In the later parts of the game, she unlocks even more powers and she becomes so overpowered in all the right ways. Geralt and Ciri's father and daughter relationship is hands down one of the best parts of the game. The general writing of the story is a bit bumpy, with some parts being really good and others kinda meh. I don't want to spoil any of it, but what I can say is the game's lore really holds the story up in places and it's what sets it apart from other fantasy games. A lot of the fantastical elements of the game, including magic and monsters, make for some good lore reading. This event called the Conjunction of the Spheres happened 1500 years ago that caused all the beasties and magic things get trapped in the world the game takes place in. This includes humans. It was something along the lines of worlds colliding and things ending up where they shouldn't be. I fucking love this. The idea that the fantasy elements of the game can be almost explained by science is very cool. It somehow makes the game more grounded. I mean, as grounded as other worlds and universes can be. I mean, they're technically plausible in our real world science. There's also other elements of the game, like prophecies and such, that can also be explained by science to a certain degree if you look into it. While some of this is just background info in the other games and books, yeah, the game's based on books, it's a huge part of the story in the third game. If you take your time and look into the lore, you will not be disappointed. The books can also be a good read if you're into that. It'll also help you appreciate the games even more. They're not essential though, so don't worry about not reading them. Ah yes, gameplay. While a good story props up a game, you don't always want to be learning about stuff. As I've mentioned, dear Geralt is a career monster hunter. In the previous games, if you've played them, you don't do as much of that. However, in the third entry of the series, you do it a lot. In the opening hour of the game, you take on your first monster contract, the first of many. You've been tasked with taking down a griffin who's being a nuisance to the locals of a village. This first contract brings to attention a lot of systems that you use throughout the game. Most of the time when you take on a contract, you'll need to do a bit of investigating to find out what the monster is and why it's being a bother in the first place. This consists of asking about to see what people know and finding things of importance using your fancy Witcher eyes to highlight stuff in the environment. Eventually, you get all the information you need to take down the beast. There's a lot of these contracts dotted about, and there's a lot of monsters to kill. Of course, you also have your fair share of humans to kill, as there's a war going on. If monster hunting isn't your thing, you can also do a bit of standard mercenary work. Witchers are known for having two swords, a silver one for monsters, and a steel one for humans. As far as the game goes in terms of mechanics, you have your standard RPG leveling system, do stuff, get XP. Upon leveling, you get points that you can invest into specific areas. I will say that I'm not a fan of how skills have to be equipped, and depending on your level, you can only have a certain amount equipped at a time. It's very possible to waste skill points on skills you'll never be able to use unless you sacrifice another. The most important part of building your character is definitely the gear you equip, as this will offer you the biggest gains in offensive and defensive stats. It's just as well that some of the gear looks pretty swish too. You also have the option to craft gear, and you can also brew potions if you plan on taking down a specific monster and you want to do bonus damage. I didn't really dabble in this too much because I found that hitting things enough time with my sword did a pretty decent job anyways. Oh, and there's also magic spells or whatever that you can do that can make sparks come out your hands, or you can push people with air slightly. The most useful ones are probably Quen, which gives you basically one free hit on yourself, and Axie, which you can use to confuse people in combat, or you can use it to persuade people in a dialogue option. The effects of the spells are pretty underwhelming, I will say, although I didn't invest much time in them when it came to skills. All my points went into raw attacking power because it did the job, what can I say? I hit things, they die. I also didn't play the game as a reviewer looking to get a gauge of how good all the game's systems are. I played the game as a normal person. I'm not here to tell you if it's a good or bad game, because Lord knows that's subjective nowadays. I'm here to lay all the cards out on the table to give you a good idea if you might enjoy it. Considering how much time you'll need to put in to see the game through, you need to know if it's enjoyable rather than just good. Oh yeah, before I close up the section, and I mentioned cards, Gwent exists. I didn't play any of it. The time I did lose and I had to wear mule ears. It's pretty in-depth. It's a standalone game. It's a card game. I like stabbing things, so I'm not going to play Gwent. Sorry, I know people like it. Before the video drags on too long, viewer retention is a bitch when you don't have any audience to begin with, I'm only going to speak about the two major expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine. Hearts of Stone is the cheaper of the two, and is basically just a big questline where you take on a bandit captain who just so happens to be immortal. The expansion adds around 10 hours of new content, new monsters, new characters, new gear. The main questline for the DLC is very, very, very good. You basically make a questionable deal with a guy who's most certainly the devil, you get possessed by a ghost and go to a wedding, and you also organise a heist on a vault full of valuables. This is only just part of the main questline, there's obviously more, but what's on offer is just brilliant, really. The characters are fantastic too. In the short time you spend with them, you really do learn a lot about them and their motivations. The story has that lovely little morally grey spot people sit in. I will say that when the word expansion is thrown around, I think I'm going to get a standalone experience in the sense that I'm going to get another cake rather than just chocolate frosting added to the one I've already got. This kind of let me down going into it, but at the same time the quality surpasses some of the stuff in the base game. The next expansion, Blood and Wine, has Geralt take on a contract in a whole new region in the land of Toussaint. I'm actually partway through playing this expansion at the moment before I wrap up playing the game altogether, so I'm not sure if I'm even qualified to talk about this. Looking at the reviews on Steam and also taking into account what I've already played, I can say this is another good piece of DLC. The whole new map you can explore is pretty big for what it is, and it looks very different to the base game. While the base game's playing space looks as though it's probably modelled on Central Europe, more likely Poland considering the books are Polish and also the game's developers are Polish, Blood and Wine is most definitely based on France, probably the south. The base game's map is dark and miserable with swamps and thick gloomy forests. Toussaint is bright and colourful, everyone is happy, and you even get your own vineyard right off the bat. There's still plenty of likeable characters along with the gear and monsters. There's also things they added like dyeing your gear different colours and the chance to gain new abilities through another questline involving some guy who's a professor who studies witcher mutations. Again, I've not played all of the Blood and Wine expansion yet, but it seems like they're being generous with the price tag as it's only a tiny bit more expensive than the other one. But there's more of it, so I guess it's worth it. They deserve being called expansions nonetheless. It takes me back to when I used to play the first Sims game all the time, and I had a few expansions for it as well. Vacation was some good shit. Nostalgia aside, good cheap expansions are hard to come by nowadays. Alrighty, so I think that's all I need to talk about really. I'm not doing a full review because I'm not qualified for that in the least. I do think I'm qualified to tell you if it's enjoyable. It is. It surprised me so actually. I knew it was a good game. I've played plenty of these fantasy RPG style games. They come a dime a dozen, but it's hard to sell someone on why this one is different. I was in the group initially that thought that even if it was good, there's no point investing time into something that I'm not going to see to completion. It's a waste. I already spoke about this at the beginning of the video, so there's no point needing to repeat myself, but I think the points I've touched upon are the standout parts that helped me to appreciate The Witcher 3 for what it is. I will say, however, do not play this game if you don't have the time to put in. You will not have fun, and you will not enjoy playing the same parts again should you want to start from scratch another time. This was something that put me off in this playthrough, but I persevered and I was rewarded. Closing this video, I want to thank you all for taking your time to give it a watch. I do want to do more of these non-spoilery video overview things like this, as I think there's more than a few people out there who are scared to take the plunge into certain games. I know that I'm that kind of person. Future videos won't have this kind of closer either, they'll only have them if something is needed to be said. If there's any games or topics that you want to see covered, give me a shout down in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. I have a tiny brain, so I need the ideas. Bye bye.